overlapping slightly with last time, the caring orientation to moral development and education. Carol Gilligan and Nell Noddings are pioneering educational scholars. They charted a new course in thinking about moral development and moral education. Each in her own way asked if our views of how we develop our identity, of how we think and act in moral situations, and of how we see ourselves and our relationships to others are more descriptive of males than females. We look first at Gilligan's objections to Erickson's and Kohlberg's theories, and then at Nodding's care theory. Carol Gilligan, Gilligan's view of identity and moral development. She argues that Erickson's view of identity development and Kohlberg's view of moral development more accurately describe what occurs with adolescent males than with adolescent females. In her view, Erickson's and Kohlberg's ideas emphasize separation from parental authority and societal conventions. Instead of remaining loyal to adult authority, individuals, as they mature, shift their loyalty to abstract principles, self-reliance, in other words, or, for example, independence, justice, and fairness. This process of detachment allows adolescents to assume a more equal status with adults. It's almost as if adolescents are saying, "You have your life and I have mine. You don't intrude on mine and I won't intrude on yours." But Gilligan argues many adolescent females have a different primary concern. They care less about separation and independence and more about remaining loyal to others through expressions of caring, understanding, and sharing of experiences. Detachment for these female adolescents is a moral problem rather than a sought-after developmental milestone. The problem for them is how to become autonomous while also being caring and connected. Gilligan's view implies that because females are socialized to value more highly the qualities of understanding, helping, and cooperation with others than that of preserving individual rights, and because the former orientation is reflected most strongly in Kohlberg's two conventional stages, 3 and 4, females are more likely to be judged to be at a lower level of moral development than males. This is certainly a reasonable hypothesis, but it is one that has not received strong support from research studies. Two conclusions stand out from the research reviews of this issue. First, both males and females use both caring, helping, cooperation, and justice, fairness, individual rights orientations to justify how they would resolve moral dilemmas. Second, there is a small tendency for females to favor a caring, helping, cooperation orientation. Nodding's care theory. The caring orientation advocated by Gilligan in the 1980s arose from her criticism that Erickson's and Kohlberg's theories did not provide the best account of the psychosocial and moral development of female adolescents. In 1984, Nell Noddings, an educational philosopher, extended Gilligan's argument in Caring, a feminine approach to ethics and moral education. Through the last 3 decades, care theory has come to focus clearly on relationships and how those relationships function. In Nodding's view, it is not enough to say that we care, to simply express a concern for someone or some group of people. Care theory focuses on whether a caring relationship exists. Noddings uses an example to illustrate the point. Teachers in a school may claim that they care deeply for students and support their claim by citing the long hours and hard work they spend in service of students and their well-being. But if students genuinely feel as though nobody cares, then a caring relationship does not exist, no matter how hard teachers work or how often they express their concern for students and their desire to help them. Is Noddings correct that establishing a caring relationship with one's students, which means to be responsive to their needs, is an important aspect of education? Research evidence, which we review in Chapter 13, and anecdotal evidence both suggest that she is. The most persuasive anecdotal evidence that we are aware of was mentioned in Chapter 1. It is the interviews conducted by Bill Smoot of great teachers. Their experience has taught them that caring for students as people and as learners has been critical to their success as teachers. Nodding's development of care theory supports Gilligan's criticisms of Erikson and Kohlberg. Together they have suggested that a caring orientation to social and moral development is an alternative to the justice, fairness, individual rights orientation that has emerged from Kohlberg's theory, and one that may lead to more socially just practices and policies. Perhaps the best approach that educators can take when they involve students in discussions of moral issues is to emphasize the utility of both orientations. The research cited above that males and females use both caring, helping, cooperation, and justice, fairness, individual rights orientations certainly supports this approach. Emphasizing both orientations when classroom discussions focus on matters of right and wrong is one way of acknowledging student diversity. Does moral thinking lead to moral behavior? The Hartshorn and May studies. Hugh Hartshorn and Mark May provided an early answer to the above question. They asked thousands of children of different ages to answer questions about right and wrong behavior, and then observed their actual behavior in various situations. What they found must have surprised them. Even though children belonged to Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, went to religious education classes, and could provide morally correct answers to hypothetical situations, they did not necessarily practice what they preached. Not only did many children act dishonestly, they often did so in a very specific way. A boy who was an outstanding student, but a below-average athlete, for example, would not cheat when asked to correct his own paper, but would inflate his scores on sports skills. Recent research shows that Hartshorn and May's basic finding is still valid. A survey of more than 23,000 high school students found that students' behaviors do not match their professed ideals. Here are some of the students' professed beliefs, followed by behaviors they said they did at least once. Note the discrepancy between the first bullet point and those that follow. 81% said they were better than most people they knew at doing the right thing. 98% said that trust and honesty are essential in personal relationships. 86% agreed that lying or cheating is not worth it because it hurts your character. And 93% were satisfied with their own ethics. 52% cheated during a test. 74% copied someone else's homework. And 32% copied an internet document verbatim for a class assignment. 18% said they stole something from a parent or relative. 14% stole something from a friend. And 20% stole something from a store. 76% lied to a parent about something significant, and 65% lied to a teacher about something significant. If there is anything positive in these findings, it is that these percentages are several points lower than when the survey was last conducted in 2010. Other studies have found that students from cohesive rather than controlling family environments were less likely to report lying to parents and were less accepting of lying. Students who perceive their teacher as less than effective facilitators of learning are more likely to cheat than students who view their instructors as effective teachers. And students are more likely to cheat when the culture of the classroom emphasizes good grades and high scores on tests. Character development as an educational goal. Whenever researchers reach a point where there is general agreement about the nature of some phenomenon, the conversation eventually turns to a consideration of what, if anything, we should do with this knowledge. In the case of moral reasoning, this conversation has been going on for quite a few years. Because of the gap between word and deed revealed by the Hartshorn and May studies, as well as a constant stream of anecdotal evidence, many proposals have been made for what is commonly called character education. One interesting proposal is that educators adopt character development as a basic goal and think of it as being composed of 4 parts: intellectual character, moral character, civic character, and performance character. The reason it should be a basic goal is that character, meaning pro-social dispositions and ways of interacting with others, supports a positive learning environment. Here's a quick look at each of these 4 components of character. Intellectual character refers to ways of thinking that direct and motivate what a person does when faced with a learning task, and that often lead to a meaningful outcome. A learner with intellectual character is, for example, curious, open-minded, reflective, strategic, and skeptical. One persuasive reason for making intellectual character an educational goal is that once these habits of mind are acquired with 1 or 2 subject areas, they are likely to generalize to other domains. Moral character is a disposition to do both what is good and what is right. The civil rights demonstrators of the 1960s, for example, knew their actions violated local laws, but were convinced that to do so was both right and good because it would lead to equal rights for all people, regardless of racial background. A student who tells her teacher that she inadvertently saw a copy of the test that the teacher plans to give tomorrow is also demonstrating moral character. Not only is this the right thing to do, but it is also a good thing to do because it preserves the integrity of a test and allows the teacher to draw unbiased inferences about what students have and have not learned. Civic character, which was one of the reasons public schools were created in the first place, is the desire and willingness to use one's knowledge and skills to become an engaged and responsible citizen. Some of the building blocks of civic character are respect for freedom, equality, and rational thinking. Understanding the importance of diversity and due process, and a willingness to participate in civic affairs. Expressions of civic character include serving on public boards and committees, doing volunteer work for charitable and social service organizations, attending city council meetings, working for candidates for public office, and running for public office. Performance character refers to personal qualities that facilitate the achievement of one's goals. Examples here include the willingness to persevere, especially in the face of obstacles, starting tasks in a timely manner, being able to recover from failure, being willing to take a stand or express a contrary point of view, having a positive outlook, and attending to detail. Research on character education programs. Many parents, educators, and political leaders believe that today's students lack the moral values possessed by previous generations. Concerned adults cite violence in schools and widespread drug abuse, among other problems, as evidence of such a decline. As we noted in the previous section, one commonly voiced solution to these problems is for the schools to institute moral education programs, also called character education programs. After reviewing the research on the effectiveness of character education programs, James Lemming drew the following conclusions. Telling students what they should or should not do through either slogans, just say no, or conduct codes is unlikely to have significant or lasting effects on character. Helping the students think about how to resolve moral dilemmas in higher level ways does not automatically result in increases in morally acceptable behavior. An individual's social environment plays an important role in the learning and exhibiting of virtuous behavior. When students have clear rules with which to guide their behavior, accept those rules as appropriate and worthwhile, and are rewarded for complying with those rules, they are more likely to exhibit morally acceptable behavior. Producing changes in moral behavior requires a commitment to a well-conceived long-term program. More recently, Lemming has advocated using a kind of engineering approach to design classroom environments that address what has been learned about effective character education programs. Many social critics recommend that as part of character education programs, children either read or have read to them stories with a moral theme, sometimes called virtue stories. Being exposed to such stories is supposed to help children develop a strong set of traditional moral values, such as honesty, trustworthiness, responsibility, and loyalty. Darcia Narvaez points out that such a claim, whether its advocates realize it or rests on 5 assumptions that are not supported by contemporary research findings on learning. Assumption 1, reading is a passive activity. The picture that emerges from thousands of research studies is that reading comprehension is not passive. Rather, it is the result of considerable cognitive activity. Children attempt to create a coherent, meaningful representation of a text by integrating the information in a text with prior knowledge. Assumption 2, all readers extract the same information from a text. Because of individual differences in prior knowledge, interests, and reading skills, each reader constructs a somewhat unique representation of what a text is about. Furthermore, texts with unfamiliar ideas are likely to be recalled less well and have more distortions than texts with more familiar ideas. Assumption 3, all readers understand the author's point. Once again, because of individual differences in prior knowledge, interests, and familiarity with the ideas presented in a text, some readers will get an author's point, while others will construct something entirely different. If you've ever argued with someone about the point of a movie or novel, you can appreciate this phenomenon. Research on summarizing text passages shows that before the age of 10, children can accurately recount much of what they read, but have great difficulty synthesizing that information to identify the author's main point. Assumption 4. Moral themes are readily accessible to readers. Because children have different conceptions, moral schemas, or prior moral knowledge, of how to get along with others and why such behavior is important, moral themes in a text are not necessarily accessible. As we noted earlier, people may base moral judgments on a variety of criteria, including personal interests, morally correct behaviors, that which benefits me, maintaining norms, morally correct behaviors, that which fosters law and order, and ideals, morally correct behavior is that which is consistent with higher order principles. Older or more intellectually advanced children are more likely to grasp moral themes that reflect maintenance of norms and ideals than are younger or less advanced children. A recent study, although not done with morality stories, reinforces this point. Second and third graders who were trained to identify and comprehend story themes did better with non-instructed children. They did better than non-instructed children, but they were unable to apply these themes to real-life situations or to identify and apply themes for which they received no instruction. Assumption 5. Moral themes are just another type of information conveyed by a text. Because moral themes vary in their complexity and abstractness, and because children's comprehension of such themes develops through predictable stages, moral themes cannot be treated as the equivalent to fact-based information. Despite the fact that character education programs have not received strong support in the research literature, probably because many programs are poorly designed and or implemented, they are popular among parents and educators, and some appear to produce positive effects. Whether or not your school has a character education program, there are certainly ways you can influence the moral development of your students. The following suggestions for teaching section provide several ideas, but before you use any techniques of moral education in your classes, it is wise to check with your principal. In some communities, parents have insisted that they, not teachers, should take the responsibility for moral instruction. Improving practice through inquiry, one teacher's story. Same story, different characters, by Tia M. Wanzo. After college, I went back to my alma mater as a teacher and as a principal. I noticed an underrepresentation of students of color in advanced placement classes. That was my experience as a student, too. I was in gifted classes from 1st to 8th grade. As I reflect on those years, I remember being one of only 3 students of color in the class for several years. I looked at the current data, and it was alarming. I reflected on my own experiences as a student, and now as an educator. I wondered if the same social pressures and expectations were still operating. As a young teenager, being intelligent and receiving high grades was thought of as acting white. I also went through a stage when I purposely obtained lower grades. When I was in high school, I did not think it was cool to be an honor roll student. So as an educator, I decided to talk to students about why they were not willing to participate in such classes. Some of the responses were, "My parents don't make me," "The teachers seem like they don't want me in the classes," "The work is too hard," "What's the point? I can't get a good grade in the regular classes," "My friends aren't in the advanced classes," "Only the nerds take the advanced classes." Time for a new ending. I decided to assist the students by, number 1, being a mentor. I would share my personal experiences as a student of color with similar past experiences. Students felt comfortable speaking to me because I walked the same halls and streets. Number 2, encouraging students to advocate. I always tried to teach students to self-advocate. Many students of color did not have parents who would challenge or question the system. Therefore, I wanted my students to begin advocating for themselves. For an example, ask a teacher what they needed to do to participate in an advanced class. Educate parents and community members. I've found that parents and community members are often not aware of their child's ability to be in an advanced placement class. Therefore, it was important for me to share the information at PTA meetings, local church services, community events, recreation centers, etc. Creating an improvement community of teachers. We created a group of teachers to improve the situation for students of color. The small group would examine root causes and seek areas of improvement. I would share my experiences, personal narratives of students, and data. The group would then work together to design and test improvements and share their work with other members of the school. Tia M. Wanzo is a former teacher, and she is currently the principal at Twin Rivers Primary. Suggestions for teaching. Recognize that younger children respond to moral conflicts differently from older children. Try to take the perspective of students and stimulate their perspective-taking abilities. Develop an awareness of moral issues by discussing a variety of real and hypothetical moral dilemmas, and by using daily opportunities in the classroom to heighten moral awareness. Moral education should be an integral part of the curriculum. It should not take place during a moral education period. Here is a hypothetical moral dilemma that a first grade teacher presented to her class. Mark was going to the movies when he met his friend Stephen. Although Stephen wanted to go to the movie with Mark, he had spent all of his allowance and wouldn't be getting any more until after the movie left town. Both boys were 12 years old, but looked much younger. If they lied about their ages, they could both see the movie for the amount of money that Mark had. Mark was unsure if he should lie about his age. Stephen said, "It's your money, so it's your decision." What should Mark do? The responses of the students illustrate both the punishment-obedience orientation, stage 1, and the instrumental relativist orientation, stage 2, of Kohlberg's pre-conventional level of morality. Mrs. Kittle, okay, what do you think Mark should do? John, him and Stephen should tell them how old they are. Emily, they shouldn't lie about their age. Miss Kittle, why do you think they shouldn't lie? Tina, because if they did lie, they'd get a spanking. John, Mark shouldn't lie about his age because it leads to a mess. Miss Kittle, what kind of mess? John, his mother might find out. Sarah, the father too. Aaron, they'd get punished. So you all think Mark and Stephen shouldn't lie because they might get caught and be punished. What if no one catches them? Would it be right to lie then? Most say yes. Billy, no, it's not. The manager of the show might catch them. But what if no one catches them? Then it's all right. Who thinks it would still be wrong to lie, even if Mark and Stephen wouldn't get caught? 5 children raise their hand. They'd still get in a mixed up mess. How? Somebody might tell that they lied. He might, that's true, but would it still be wrong even if Stephen didn't tell anybody? Yes. Why, Troy? I don't know, but it is. It's not nice to lie. Yeah, and it's not fair to other people either. Who wouldn't it be fair to? The others in the show, they had to pay full price. You mean if other 12-year-old kids had to pay the full price for their tickets, then it's not fair for Mark and Stephen to get in cheaper. Right. Create a classroom atmosphere that will enhance open discussion. For example, arrange face-to-face groupings, be an accepting model, foster listening and communication skills, and encourage student-to-student interaction. Richard Hirsch, Diana Paolito, and Joseph Reimer offer the following specific suggestions for supervising classroom discussions. Highlight the moral issue to be discussed. Example, describe a specific real or hypothetical moral dilemma. Ask why questions. Example, after asking students what they would do if they were faced with a moral dilemma under discussion, ask them to explain why they would act that way. Complicate the circumstances. Example, after students have responded to the original dilemma, mention a fact that might complicate matters. For example, the involvement of a best friend in the dilemma. Use personal and naturalistic examples. Example, invite students to put themselves in the position of individuals who are confronted by moral dilemmas described in newspapers or depicted on television. What students know and how students know. Okay, says Don, so there's a lot of research to suggest that students just plain think differently than teachers. Right, says Celeste, assuming that kids in our classes know less than we do may be correct, at least I hope so, but that assumption alone doesn't get us very far in terms of designing learning experiences for our students. We need to recognize how students construct what they know, what kinds of perspectives they use to decide what's important, and even what's right and wrong. Antonio nods. So my students weren't able to connect with my problem identification lesson because they probably did not conceive it the same way I did. And my ideas about what's important are different from theirs. I'm looking at the concept of problem from a different developmental perspective, a different set of lenses. Come to think of it, it's not that they simply don't know what I know. It's more like I didn't connect with the way they construct knowledge and the issues that they are dealing with at that age. Connie says developmental theory and research give us ways to think about the kinds of issues that influence students' interactions with people and how those interactions help them construct the way they understand their world, including their own sense of identity. It's critical that we recognize that students think differently than we do. We need to understand how they construct knowledge. Don says, I've never really thought about teaching as being anything more than just giving students knowledge, but it's more than that. It has to be about helping kids construct their understandings of their world and of themselves. That seems pretty important. It is, says Connie. It is also important that you compare your observations and inferences against relevant theory and research. In fact, it's critical for your development as teachers. We must observe and infer. It's what human beings do. But as educators, we must take the next step and examine our observations and inferences so that we reveal our assumptions and, once revealed, test them against theory and research.